From Their Eyes, a Shadow of the Colossus based fic. Chapter 10. Terror in the Mist. Bazaran rested in the cave he now called home. It was the only place that any of his kind would have found comfortable in the land he now called home. Of course, countless years ago, there were many of his kind that called the area home. The constant geysers caused clouds that made the area constantly dark. Even the few trees in the area were now petrified due to the darkness. It was an area that was almost uninhabitable, perfect for colossi like Bazaran. It reminded Bazaran of the cloud-shrouded lands he and his fellow colossi had occupied in the old world. All of his kind lived in the dark lands of the home world. At that time, his kind enjoyed seclusion and enjoying the darkness. They never saw any of the shadow creatures that the occasional traveler would speak of. Of course, in a barren wasteland, a lack of life meant a lack of the parasites that preyed on life. It was an ideal situation. That all changed the day the colossi known as Dorman came to the Dark Lands. Several of Bazaran's brethren were taken in by Dorman's claims about the shadow beings. Dorman had even convinced them that the elders had felt it was best to get rid of the Dark Lands. Bazaran even believed the lie, since their kind relished the dark. The elders always respected the homes of the various colossi and other life forms native to their world. It was only the shadow beings that had not been native to the homeland. That day had sealed the fate of Bazaran's kind. He remembered joining Dorman and many other colossi in fighting the elders and trying to destroy the castle prison of the Queen of the Shadows. When the war that almost brought the population of all life in the homeland to levels where life would die off ended, the elders exiled all of them. It would be impossible for any of them to return, since the way back would not allow any colossi through. So Bazaran's kind left Dorman and scoured the lands they were now confined to. Eventually, after several of them died off due to wounds and the lack of a dark place to live, they found the geyser-filled lands Bazaran now called home. For a moment, Bazaran's recollections were interrupted when he heard Malice speak in his mind. "Bazaran, you must be careful. Dorman has convinced one of the little people to help him. The little man has slain half of our numbers. He is making his way to you next." Bazaran took that information in. He had no reason to doubt Malice, since Malice had always been able to see through Dorman's lies. But the calm did not sit well with him. This had been due to the fact that Bazaran knew the little people never liked to enter the geyser field. When they had entered the lands the colossi called home, they never stayed. The land was devoid of all the things that the little people would need to survive. This meant the little people would stay away, and the colossi would have their peace and quiet. That remained the way it was, until Dorman again approached their kind. The conniving colossi had told them that the little people were starting to plot against the colossi, and had taken to setting up hiding spots in the geyser field. Dorman had told them that the dark area would be the perfect area for the little people to hide in. If the claims had been true, it would have meant the little people were planning to invade and kill them. That lie led to a massive disaster. After hearing that, Bassaran's kind began attacking the little people who dared enter, and started approaching the edges of the geyser field. The little people had, in turn, started attacking Bassaran's kind. At first it had been one-sided, until the people managed to kill one of his kind. Soon it became an extermination, and all but Bassaran were killed. At that point in time, Bassaran had called Malice for help. It was then that he learned of Dorman's plans to keep the little people under his thumb, and how Dorman had to be stopped again. Once the true problem had been determined, Bassaran left the geyser field to finally help destroy Dorman and give them all freedom. The little people left the lands, and he and 15 other colossi held the bulk of Dorman's powers in themselves. The evil colossi had been rendered powerless. Basran's mind was snapped back to the present when he heard an odd sound. It sounded like one of the small animals the little people used to travel. His eyes were used to the darkness of the area, and he looked around. He didn't feel threatened yet, since there was no way that any little person could find the cave in the gloom. After a few moments, he noticed a figure approaching the cave. It had to be the little man, riding one of their steeds. He also noticed the sword the man was holding. He remembered it from when Dorman had been defeated, and he knew it could be used on him if the little man could reach the sigil. Bassaran was determined not to give the little man that chance. The second he was sure the little man was in range, he launched a few blasts at them. While the little man would have a hard time seeing in this gloom, it meant the blasts would most likely kill the little man and their steed. He went over to investigate where the man had been spotted, but noticed nothing there. There did not seem to be any sign of the little man there, nor the steed. He knew his blasts wouldn't totally destroy the little man, so where had the man gone if they weren't killed? He was momentarily distracted when a geyser went off underneath him. The force of the water had him stuck on two legs as the others were helplessly in the air. He received his answer about the little man when pain struck two of his feet. Whatever had hit him made those two legs buckle, allowing his massive form to lower on that side. He tried to get up again, but whatever had hit his feet was too painful to recover from right away. He tried to look around for his attacker, but with how he was positioned, he could not see anything. After a moment, Bassaran could have sworn he felt something climbing up his legs. He tried to get up again, and this time succeeded. But it had been too late. The figure was on top of him, running towards his head. He knew what was going to happen, and started to shake his body, tossing back his own head. He needed to shake the little man off, especially if the little man had that sword. For several tense moments, Bassaran wondered if he was safe. Had he thrown off the little man, or were they still alive? He waited a few more moments, resisting every slight motion as a reason to attack. Had the little man who had been killing the colossi been flung to their death? A blinding pain in the middle of his head answered the question. The little man had managed to get up to his head, right where the sigil was. He violently shook his head, hoping the action would send his attacker flying. For a few moments, the pain almost went away, and he felt he had succeeded. Then, the pain happened again, and it was more intense. It was also brief, and Bassaran knew why. He he was dying. The little man had killed him and had released more of Dorman's essence. That foul colossi would be able to reform unless one of the others stopped this little man. The last thoughts that crossed his mind was that one of the colossi left might be able to stop the man. Dorman watched in delight as the part of his essence that had been trapped in Bazaran left the colossi's body and flew into the little man's body. More of the man's soul would be gone, but that was fine for Dorman. He'd still keep his word about reviving the dead woman. It was part of his backup plan. He watched as more of the shadow beings appeared around the little man, bringing the body into the shadow realm that was their home. It would only be momentarily, but it would be long enough to make sure the man was brought back to the temple. The more that gathered meant that his power was growing, and they could feel it. They knew their time was soon to return. With the shadow being's arrival, Dorman returned his attention to the next colossi that the little person would have to encounter. It was Dirge, and Dorman remembered the mental thoughts of that type of colossi. They were some of the most bestial of the colossi. He might have to give the little man some luck in dealing with the colossi. He would have to fine-tune the little man's aim, knowing how valuable eyes were to colossi like Dirge. That would solve that problem. Things were getting too close for failure to happen now. It would all be a matter of time now.